crazy awesome. Oh, she's amazing. She's crazy awesome.
Hi guys, welcome back to Coffee Talk with Brandy. Today I have my amazing friend Anthony, who said he'd be on this little talk show because he's cool and he loves me. And
most of the time.
Most of the time. Sometimes he doesn't. But Anthony is a therapist and he is passionate about mental health as well. So welcome, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Tell us a little bit about what brought you to the profession of mental health and being a therapist, and do you have a specialty in therapy?
Well, I think for myself, it was, I kind of stumbled into this like many people do. I never grew up thinking that I was going to be a therapist or anything in the helping field. I always wanted to be in the military.
Oh, yeah.
And so for me, it was, I stumbled into it. I just started going to school. It was maybe at the end of a 3-year, very dark period of my life.
Yeah.
After war, divorce, and all the things that can arise when you're trying to figure out what just happened. And, I started going to school. I took a couple courses, a social work course, and I took another one. And for me, it was stumbling in the right place at the right time and in a program that was actually part of my healing process.
Oh, good.
So,
Well, tell me a little bit more about the military, because I know that you are or did serve in our military. So tell me a little bit about that experience and how long did you serve our country?
So I was medically retired at 17 and a half years. I have a back injury, and I had some other injuries, mental health injuries, actually, and I was part of a special population of people that got to go to Walter Reed and have our brains imaged.
Oh.
There are a certain percentage of individuals that have a thing called traumatic nightmares, where they actually act out things.
Okay.
And so in 2010, I was invited to DC for a sleep study and imaging. I had these insane dreams, very physically violent dreams, over and over and over again. You can imagine, I was a father with 3 children. I was married at the time. It was a lot of issues. From then, I ended up going back to Iraq again, and then coming home, and then it just kind of stumbled from there on. And at the end of the day, I can look back on it and say, I went through that, all of even the dark of the dark. I went through that so that I had a clue, so that I knew what I was going to have to deal with. And, I stumble into social work. I figure out that, this bachelor's degree, I can't really do anything with that. So, I had people encouraging me, shaping me, molding me, helping me on my path. You need to go here, you need to go do this. And, I ended up at a university where I could study my master's degree and actually do an internship at the VA. So, so it was an 18-month program, and for a year of that, I got to help veterans in the environment. Interesting story is that it was the same environment, the same doctors, that it had me hospitalized on 3 occasions.
Wow, that sounds really challenging.
Yeah, I went from patient in this said VA to my own psychologist was my mentor and was the department head, and to be part of that, I can't even imagine what it was for her to see the change that place created. And I was the fourth one. I was the first veteran who got kind of helped through.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that one of your specialties is helping our veterans. For all of us out there who have so many people in our lives who we love, our veterans, I would like if you would share with us, how can we better support our veterans, especially in mental health or in any capacity? Because I know that just what I've seen and experienced, I don't know if there's enough support for our veterans, and maybe your experience is different. So tell us a little bit more of what we can do to better support you and our whole veterans.
Okay, so one of the topics that I'm most passionate about in veterans, although I do value the veteran themselves, I find that there may be more potential value to our nation as a whole if we look at the veteran in the context of family. Okay, so we're talking about, normally the average married age in the military is actually lower than the general population. There's younger guys getting married younger, so they have young families, and they're coming home to with a plethora of issues. And what I'm going through, what I've gone through, certainly helps me helping the veteran. But I'm also have been thinking about the context of my own experience and how it's affected my own children. Yeah. Right? And so part of that for me is learning how to heal with the ex-spouse, understanding that my children were involved at crucial stages of their own psychology when I was going through war the first time. All 3 of my children have a distinct memory of listening to Dad on Christmas Day, opening up packages, and then me running out of the phone booth because the alarm is going off that we're being attacked. Okay. So to understand that war that I was actually in, my children were actually in as well. So this is where I think that if we can view change and healing in the context of family, we might understand that we have actually bigger problem than just the veteran. It's a bigger problem.
Thank you so much for bringing that to my attention, because I hadn't thought of that in that context so much, because I have not yet been through that experience, nor do I think I ever will. And at the same time, knowing what I know about trauma and all of that stuff, we adapt to our surroundings, and I can't even imagine everything that you guys have experienced being over there. And then when we come home, we might still be living in survival mode as well. And it's like, how do we create that change? As you're just telling us, like, let's not look at it from just the veteran's perspective, because we are a whole, we are a collaborative, we are a family, and you have your family. And as you were just saying, on Christmas, when you would call home, your children experienced that war in that moment. And I think that's really important, so that we also value our families enough to know that everybody needs that support, whether it's peer support, mental health therapist, family connection. That's so vital, and I think it's so important. What for you has brought the most connection in your life, and what do you think helps other people and families as vets and stuff?
So, an area that, first of all, everybody asks, how did you find your way back? And for me, there were many pieces. the most important thing is the ability to not stop searching. So everybody talks about the failure of this and the failure of that, and I'm not going to the VA for this anymore. And what I would say for individuals in the VA program is that the VA is getting ready to go through a revolutionary process in what we're doing with mental health medication, and that's coming through the studies through the VA and through other agencies on psychedelics.
Yeah.
It's happening, it's real, and it's changing lives. Now, on the other piece that I think that we could really help is that if you look at Rand Paul report 2012, it cites that the number one indicator, the number one indicator for veterans returning home with issues and having committed suicide is not PTSD, but rather family discourse.
Disconnection.
Yes.
Yes.
Discourse. And so when you tie the discourse and then you look at the studies of divorce rates for combat veterans, and some go from the 70s all the way up to the 85 percentiles. Then you take that percentage and you have that's a good chunk of people that we know are going to go through divorce, right?
Yeah.
We have an idea. Well, then where are they ending up at? They're ending up in divorce court, and immediately across America, there is this perception with mental health, with PTSD in general, and the idea is PTSD veterans are they are unsafe. So once you have a designation code, a federal code for a mental health illness, that can be used in a courtroom to determine your safety, even though it may not be aligned with who you are and what you are. And that does happen. So what I think, and I've been to DC and lobbied on the Capitol on this exact topic, is that the VA, who has a person in the VA that already deals with people that are incarcerated, and they're already in every courtroom throughout every county in the nation, that they could bring this family court support in a specialty court for veterans who are dealing with family issues, to keep families together, require them to go get help in the VA, and keeping the family together. That's what I think that we really need to support, is keeping, if there's families out there, obviously supporting the veteran, but supporting the family.
Yeah. Well, and I really appreciate that thought about supporting the family as well, because as you know, I do support families, and it's really about bringing family voice to the table with all of these people, whether it's a parole officer, whether it's youth services, whether it's, school systems. So I'm curious a little bit of what would it look like if we supported our veterans and their families in a wraparound setting like we do with families already in the school system and youth that have challenging behaviors. And not that I'm saying there's challenging behaviors as adults in that capacity. What I'm trying to say is, what would it look like if we rethink our system and rethink our families and help the wives and the husbands who have spouses who have been to war and have been in these countries to know and how to re-engage? Because I can imagine, I cannot compare my trials to your trials, but I can and have been through some pretty significant trauma, and knowing how I had to re-engage myself and re-engage with people that I might not have known in that capacity anymore, and the reality of the work that they also had to do to come to that understanding of where I was. And so I'm wondering if that might be helpful in that setting where we support our vets and our families with peer support and systems that were different thinking versus you just need to do this, or telling people what to do. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it makes sense how you do that. What the military, the DOD in general, and
can you say what is DOD?
Department of Defense in
Thank you.
general.
Okay.
they want to make sure that the Veterans Affairs have that soldiers are having a good transition into being into the Veterans Affairs system, right?
Yeah.
And there's always been this disconnect. But if we could get to a point where we're transitioning families. Okay, we're going to transition families.
Not
Yeah,
the vets.
transition families. Okay,
Thank
so now we have a care team on the other side that says, hey, we understand you've been through such and such, or you're dealing with such and such on this side, and we're going to help you on this side as well with that. Understanding that there are things that, if you understand that there are rates of divorce and rates of discourse and all of these statistics to support, hey, we might need to talk about the things that the service member is going to go through.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's sometimes we have a lot of dual families in the military. That just happens a lot. And so, you got two sets of families, or two parents going through the things with their own individual issues, trying to figure it out afterwards. And so if we could always circle around that, how can we get better how can we get to better serve the veteran? Well, it's got to be the resources around the veteran as well, and that includes the family.
Thank you. So reiterating exactly what you just said, we can't help veterans in isolation. We need to help them as a collaborate of every person that is in their circle, their families, their wives, their spouses, their partners, their children. I think that's so important, and I know statistically, and this is always hard, but it's bringing these hard conversations to the forefront and talking about them. But I know that every day 22 veterans take their lives.
Okay.
So, and that's true.
Well, that's just the veterans.
Yes, that is
Okay.
just the veterans.
So and the number for active duty people is another 17 to 18 a day, but it doesn't tell the story about all of the civilians that are within the Department of Defense that are deployed forward. Just when I'm deployed forward, a lot of those people are deployed forward, and it doesn't talk about the families.
Yeah.
When everything breaks up and everything just goes crazy.
And we need to be talking collectively about the families.
Yes.
Well, and I know in my own work across the board, and people sometimes label suicide as being selfish and all that stuff, and I just want to say that it is not. When somebody is in the throes of it, there's so much pain and so much desire to try to figure out answers, and collectively I know that asking that question, which is really hard, but through my training, and I remember I did a training one time, the very first time I did a training on suicide intervention, I was shaking. I was in a room full of people who were taking the same training that I was, and they asked us to ask the question, are you feeling suicidal? And I was shaking in that room because I didn't want to ask it, because everything we've been told is like, we get scared, like, don't ask that question, you might make them want to do it. And I just want to spell out that myth right now that is not true. That being brave enough to have a hard conversation and asking somebody point blank if they are, maybe that's a bad thing to say, but asking somebody, and we can frame it like this. So if people are searching and are worried about your friends who might be experiencing some depression or whatnot, I know this is a hard question to ask, and it's extremely important. And looking at that person saying, sometimes when somebody feels depressed, they might feel like suiciding. Is that something you're feeling? These kind of things, asking these real honest questions can truly save lives. And I just want to, we can talk more about that on a different segment for Coffee Talk with Brandy, because in my own life, I have lost 8 people in my own life to suicide. And I want to help people where I can. So just asking that question is exceedingly important. And I know it's scary if somebody on the other side literally says, well, yeah, I am. Because then we think, oh my gosh, I've got to fix this. What am I going to do with that? And here's what I can tell you. We can't not fix that. But what we can do is we can be there with somebody and say, I hear what you're saying, and I want you to know that I'm right here with you. And then you can reach out to proper supports. You can call the National Suicide Hotline and those things. So thank you for kind of going in that conversation with me, but I really feel it's really important. And I think it goes back to also what you've been talking about is like, this is a whole family thing. Everybody is one unit in that perspective. And collectively, we as a nation have been experiencing a trauma. And that is trauma after trauma within our schools, within war, within all of that. So how do we collectively help one another so that we're not isolating each other?
And I think that if we continue to have the dialogue, continuing to veterans who know that the family is an issue, I know the family is an issue now.
Yeah.
And I intimately know because of my education. But what I want to say is that if I know to ask the questions, but if I teach other people, ask, but what about the family?
Yeah.
What about the family? Well, and I'm still learning because, my children are still dealing with it.
Yeah.
There are pieces of my children's childhood that were taken away from them because I didn't know how to deal with all the stuff that I was going through.
Yeah.
And it is my duty now to help them unwind that. At least give them knowledge when they need it, and help unwind this process that has happened. They saw this happened, but now Dad's in the healing process, right? And Dad's helping others through the healing process. So there is something to that. And so the process is that we have to be coaches. We have to have that leadership that you learn in the military has to cross on over. Veterans helping veterans. Peer supports, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
We don't know all the answers, but we know how to get you on the journey,
Yeah.
right? And if we can get people on the journey, just go explore.
Yeah.
This is unhealthy. That's healthy over there.
Yeah.
Go that way.
Right? And it's that self-reflection piece. When we, at least what I've experienced in my own life, when I am in a space where I feel like I want to move forward, I turn within and ask myself questions. Where is this frustration coming from? Where is this anger coming from? How do I move forward from that? And really becoming insightful. And I just want to also say, I know that you're a therapist and you are a peer support. And I think that's amazing because you have had those experiences, and that's really what peer support is. It's coming with that lived experience lens and coming right beside one another. Thank you so much for being so courageous to come here and share a little bit of your story on, hopefully this will go live somewhere. I'm hoping, I want to help people, but I really appreciate the vulnerability that it takes to come on to a little talk show. And I know that I'm not well known yet, but someday Coffee Talk with Brandy is going to be like Ellen. I promise. Like, Ellen's my girl. But in the process of moving forward and just reiterating what you've said, the biggest takeaway that I have is it's all about everyone in that life. It's not just our vets. We can support our vets better when we support the family unit and when we give and help our families understand what's the process, what might be happening, so that everybody's clued in to, things that might happen. I mean, behaviors can change, all of this stuff can change, trauma changes us, and the beautiful thing is that there can be healing, as you've shared with us, and so I really appreciate that. Anything else that you want our audience to know before we close?
Thank you for having me.
Aw, thanks so much. Bye, guys. Have a good week. I'll talk to you later. Bye. See if I can put this.